So Melina Abdullah, I'm with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us on This Is Not a Drill. As you all know, since March of this year, we've presented This Is Not a Drill to provide information to our people, to make sure that we continuously struggle for justice and are aware of the threats to justice that we face. We're grateful today to Dr. Shirley Weber for joining us and really being the initiator of this conversation around Proposition 16. You all know that we are just 26 days away from the election. And as the world watches and engages and struggles over who will occupy the White House, we also know that there's some really, really important measures for Californians, especially for Angelenos, especially. One of the measures is Proposition 16, which after many years would restore affirmative action in the state of California. Dr. Shirley Weber, our assembly member, who I just greeted as being behind every single piece of strong legislation that's come out of Sacramento in the last several years, is also the author of Proposition 16. And we're going to be talking about why affirmative action is so important in the state of California and why we have to pass Proposition 16. Also joining the conversation are Dr. Lori Frazier, who is my sister from another mister, one of very many political scientists. And we do all know each other, and we all like each other, and we all confer, and we all call on each other. So thank you so much, Lori, for taking, we always take each other's calls, but for taking my call yesterday morning when I said we need a political science perspective, for agreeing to be on here at such short notice, and for always standing up and using your position. Dr. Lori Frazier is the acting director of the Bunche Center at UCLA. She made sure that I corrected what was on the flyer, because we know that our beloved Kelly Lytle Hernandez is on leave from her role as director of the Bunche Center, leaving it in the very capable hands of Dr. Lori Frazier, who is also the first Black woman, the first woman of color to ever be hired on the tenure track in political science at UCLA, and is a tenured professor of political science at UCLA. Also joining the conversation is my Baba Akili, who everybody knows, who is, basically the co-host here on This Is Not a Drill, and part of the core team of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, veteran organizer. If you do not know Baba Akili, then you are not a real organizer. We are grateful that you are here to join the conversation. And then finally joining the conversation at the last minute, just added, even though I asked her first, we had the conversation about this first, Dominique DePrima asked, where are you on Proposition 16? Are you guys gonna take a stance on Proposition 16? It's really, really important. Everybody knows that Dominique DePrima is the voice that we have to listen to here in Los Angeles, that brings it to us every day on KJLH's front page. She is a powerhouse in a tiny body. She is just one of our most beloved freedom fighters here in Los Angeles and around the globe. And so we're grateful that all four of you are here joining us on This Is Not a Drill every single week. We're grateful to be joined by Pro Bono ASL, who offers our ASL translation for us. Thank you for partnering with us on this and on everything. And before we get into Prop 16, I also want to lift up, the importance of Black women's leadership. Many of us saw Kamala Harris's performance yesterday during the vice presidential debates. And I think that, I want to start with the good, that, if nothing else, she showed herself, she's proven herself to be far more competent than the current occupants of the White House, right? She's proven herself to be one who can definitely hold her own. I was proud every time she said, "I'm speaking." I appreciated that assertion. But we're also reminded that we are living in a country that is rampant with white supremacy, with white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism that is seeking to stomp us out. And I'd love to have each of our guests just quickly weigh in on what you thought of last night. I know all of you watched. What are you thinking in terms of the top of the ticket before we move down the ticket? And I know this is something that Dominique is doing on her show for the next month. She really walks us through the ballot and what's at stake. So I'm wondering, at the top of the ticket, what are your feelings?
Well,
Dominique, can we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been really practical about the top of the ticket. I need to get rid of Trump. And I was excited to see a Black woman, a Californian, someone who has moved pretty far in the progressive direction from some of her earlier positions, and an AKA, Bison, a Howard grad, at the top of the ticket. I thought she conducted herself very well. And I also want to point out, in a sort of symbolic, spiritual, and humorous sense, that we all must remember what flies land on. Corpses, demons, and dead people. I guess that's the same as corpses. And I think the symbolism should be taken with all of its implications.
So you're talking about how that fly just would not leave Mike Pence's head, right?
Yeah. It's the return of the zombie. Yes,
And flies also land on shit. So, absolutely. Yes, and I'm sorry I've come to terms with the fact that when I cuss, it's a curse, right? So, it is what it is. But thank you for that. Thank you for that. Baba Akili, what were your thoughts?
Well, I have to be honest with you, Melina. I was on a call last night with the Downtown Crenshaw Rising, and we were planning for a press conference and an action and a community meeting this Saturday. So I missed most of it. So I can't give you my observations and impressions.
That's an easy way to avoid the critique, right? Yes. Dr. Frazier, what are your thoughts? You're on mute.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with all of you. This is a long time coming. Really, it's been since 2016 that Black women have began to push for and demand that the Democratic Party position their political and their policy interests. We've been long called the backbone of the Democratic Party, the stalwarts of the Democratic Party, the most reliable voters of the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party has yet to really show up in the ways that really fortify Black women beyond the tropes of the backbone and the stalwart and the reliable voter. So we're really excited, and we were proud to see her on stage last night, and really, going head to head with Mike Pence. But with that also comes the same kind of fear and trepidation oftentimes for Black women when we rise to power, because we know that racism and sexism is still alive and well. We also know that we have to continue to protect Black women canvassers. We need to continue to protect Black women poll workers and continue to protect Black women voters, and really position the interest and ask questions about the extent to which they will be protected as canvassers, as poll workers, and as voters on Election Day.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Dr. Weber, I would love for you to weigh in and really, oftentimes when we think about, so I don't know if you all know, but my dissertation was actually on Black women elected officials, Black women's leadership, and the different ways in which it does make a difference when Black women hold office. So before you speak, I'd just like to lift up the fact that you have been an example of that, right? You have been one that, and we need to be clear that not all Black women lead in what we call authentic ways and what Lani Guinier calls authentic ways, right? So we do have some skin folk who ain't kinfolk, right? But Black women have the tendency to be much more grounded in the collective interests of Black people than other folks. And this is based on the data that I collected, and it's been some time now, but also based on contemporary observations. And when we think about your work in the State House, that's absolutely proven to be true. So how did you receive Kamala Harris, both her performance last night, but also her candidacy as Vice President of the United States?
Well, I know Kamala, and I sent her a note letting her know that I thought she did a very good job last night, and she responded quickly back to me, thanking me for that. I think as a symbol for a number of Black women, it was a very positive symbol that says, Black women are smart, intelligent, strong, and can basically go to toe and do those things which we know we can do anyway. I mean, so this becomes a national vision. I'm kind of like Mr. Prima. I've decided that I have one mission, and that is to change the people in the White House. So I have reserved all of my negative comments and all my critical views for another moment. As I told people, it's like when Obama was president, and every time I went to a conference, they wanted to have a conference on Obama, and they wanted to analyze what he had done and all this kind of stuff. And I was president of the National Council of Black Studies, and I said, we're not going to do that until 2016. Now, because y'all haven't done anything of this, you haven't done anybody about any of these other people, and all of a sudden we're going to be analytical concerning Obama. So we're not going to do that right now. We're going to take it as it is, and we're going to move forward because he will get enough criticism from white folks. So I had reserved all of my comments about Obama and any organization I was in that wanted to have all these deep critical analysis. And I asked and said to them, if we have a whole workshop that's the critical analysis of Obama, we will, for the first time in the National Council, have international news people in the room, videotaping us. And when they don't come at all, they're going to come that time. And because why? Because they want to take what we say and turn it into something negative. And then we got to deal with these internal fights that we don't need to have right now. So when he leaves, then we'll have a whole seminar and workshop on it. And once he left, nobody seemed to have done too much of a workshop on it, but it was interesting that I did that. But I think she held her own. It was important. She went in to do a job, and that job was to do no harm. That they're winning, that Trump is doing enough to destroy everything around him, and everybody around him if you don't pay attention to him. And so her job was to go there and not leave with anybody asking questions, being negative, picking apart what she said and all those kinds of things. And she did that. That was her job, to go in as vice president and do that. The hope, of course, is that at some point she will have gotten enough political clout and what have you for president. That's the vision that people have. Whether or not that becomes true remains to be seen, because one thing that we know for sure is not only is this country very racist, it's also very sexist. And people saw that with when you think that all the white women are going to vote with you, that's one of the challenges we have in Prop 16. They do something else. They still love white men who control them and who are their leaders, and love that more than anything else, which is really quite amazing when you think about it. But I thought she did okay. I mean, there were no glitches, there was no burps in it, there was no shout out to Black people, there was none of that stuff. And I didn't really look for it. I mean, I really did not expect that, because I knew she went in to basically calm people down, let people know that she can be a leader and can be somewhat president if necessary, and that she could do the job and that she could handle him without a whole lot of challenges. And of course, I think the fact that everybody was nervous about her being the angry Black woman, taking over the program, running things, shaking her head, doing whatever we're supposed to be doing. A lot of folks were nervous about that. So she was under tremendous pressure not to be too aggressive. And so as a result, some people say she wasn't aggressive enough. But we understand that that's a part of it. Whatever you do, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But at least at the end of the day, as we look today to see what people are saying, there's no damage done. That they're still ahead. If things go as planned, we will get anybody in the White House. Like I told people, if we run out of shortage of folks, my 2 grandkids stand them on top of each other and put them in a trench coat. and that'll be better than what we have. I mean, you know, at least they probably listen to their mother and their grandmother. Well, this man we have doesn't listen to anybody. So
you didn't think when Senator Harris gave him that look?
she
You
didn't
didn't
want
think
to
that
it
was shout out to Black people? I thought that was like Black girl look.
Well, yeah, she can't avoid all of her blackness now. She got a little bit out every now and then, you know, but expected her to argue, and she'd been programmed not to stop him, you know, as people say, she should have stopped him. She should have, you know, I said her job was to do no harm. You know, you are ahead, you're winning the race. Don't go around here and start tying up your shoes and fall over yourself. Run the race, finish it, so we can, in 23 days, get somebody else in here that might stop the virus, it might save all of us from ourselves, it might save the world. I mean, you know, that is our real challenge. We're at the lowest state of leadership in the world, I think, at this point, and we're in the throes of a madman. And we've got to get out of that the best way possible. So I really haven't taken positions on who's running and how, you know, It's like I'm an anti-Trump person. And I think most folks that I know who on that ticket, or even before they even formed the whole ticket, was better than Trump, period. And better than Trump. And we got to get out of this quick.
Well,
and
I think absolutely I did feel for her, though. When Mike Pence was talking crazy, and I felt her not want to fall into that angry Black woman category and smile. And then she was criticized for smiling too much.
Oh yeah.
And then this morning, Trump comes on and calls her a mother. And I'm like, was he watching the debate that I was watching? But it's craziness. And I think many people in the state and in the country feel the way that you do, that it's any means necessary to get Trump out, right? And my mother got really angry at me about a month ago because we did one of these shows on Kamala Harris right after she was chosen as the VP pick. And we had a bunch of political scientists. So it was me and Keisha Middlemass and James Taylor. And we were having a good old time, you know, talking about, you know, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And my mom was like, just don't say anything bad about her. You can say it after she wins, right? And so that was the approach that she wanted to take. But I did want to lift up, Dr. Weber, that we know that a lot of our folks are going to go to the polls, and we have to push everybody to go to the polls and vote, right? So we know that it's in Trump's interest to keep more people home. It's in our interest to get as many people out as possible. We also know that there's the very real issue of Black people, Indigenous people, brown people, poor people, and progressives and leftists and revolutionaries offering some, I think, very valid critique of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I think that my message to folks has been, even if you don't like Biden and Harris, we still need you to go out and vote, because there's so much on the ballot beyond the presidency, right? And also, we constantly evoke and refer to and pay homage to people like Fannie Lou Hamer, whose 103rd birthday we just celebrated, right? We just acknowledged. How can you call Fannie Lou Hamer's name and then not vote, right? And so what this show today is about some of those other items that are on the ballot. And I think there's nothing greater of greater importance than Proposition 16, but most folks aren't aware of Prop 16 or why there's so much at stake for Black folks and brown folks. Can you just give us a summary of what the proposition is, Dr. Weber?
Sure. 24 years ago, some of you remember the term Proposition 209, and what happened with 209. 209 basically banned affirmative action in the state of California. And made California the beginning of, I think, 8 other states. So there are 41 states that still have affirmative action. That was affirmative action is, as I said, it takes affirmative action to try to create a level playing field and equality with regards to those who are in education, those who are in contracts and employment. And so we had a person who, like I say, all skin folks ain't your kin folks, who basically introduced Proposition 209, and it talked about equality and opportunity and so forth and so on, but it banned any consideration of race or gender in those three areas of employment, education, and contracting. So what it did was it made it impossible for those positions in cities and counties and school boards and state level to ever fashion any kind of program that might produce equality or might help us to overcome the inequalities that we face. In other words, if at one point with universities, when I went to grad school, there was a program called the GAP program at UCLA. And that program didn't necessarily get us in grad school, but once you were there, it gave you information, it gave you a mentor, it helped you to navigate graduate school, because these were students who didn't know a lot about grad school. Or programs like we had in San Diego, because we had the failure of a lot of African-American males in our K-12 system. And we developed a whole program to focus on young Black men who were failing our schools. And as a result, we were able to have a program that took a situation where we only had 32 Black boys with a B or better average, and basically ended up with 600 Black men with B or better average by getting mentors and getting people to advocate for them in terms of education and those kinds of things. And so we were able to address those issues. We addressed the same issues with Latinas. So what happens is that affirmative action gives you the ability to look at a situation that's unequal and not just give away stuff, but to create programs and opportunities and remove barriers so that you can then have equality. We saw contracting in cities in San Diego in early 1900s. We had moved to the point where we had over 40% of our contracts were with women and minorities. Once Prop 209 passed, a few years later, we have went down to 1.5%, because we could not create outreach programs that went out and particularly recruited women to apply for these jobs and to give them an opportunity to understand it. So what happens is that you have to do something, you have to do it for everybody. And so we saw a tremendous decline in economic development, a tremendous decline in admissions to med schools and law schools in California. As soon as Proposition 209 passed, I think the very next year, there was like one Black person in med school, one Black person in law school. And so the universities then had to develop all kinds of creative ways of going around to basically recruit students rather than going directly to the recruitment. We used to recruit students, Black students, teachers in San Diego City schools from the Black colleges. We could actually go to the Black colleges to recruit Black teachers in our schools. We can't do that anymore because that's race-based. Even though we know we need Black teachers, we cannot develop a program that attracts Black teachers. And we had a program that attracted Black men out of the military to work with our students. And so Prop 209 prevented that thing. And so what we've seen now is a tremendous decline in equal opportunity and access, because we can't intervene, and it makes us have to do all these other kinds of things to go around it, to try to get to it. And most of the time we don't get there. We don't get to level the playing field and create equal opportunity and access. And so what this will do is it will remove the ban of where it says you can't consider race or gender. This allows us to do that. But it also, because of all the court cases in the past, still has some stipulations on it. You know, in other words, you just can't start developing programs. You have to make sure that there's a need, there's really a disparity that's there, that what you're putting together will actually basically handle the disparity and so forth and so on. So we're excited about it because it really restores affirmative action after 24 years back to California, and allows us then to begin to address the issues of race and gender in employment and contracting and in education. And it's a 24-year long time coming, but we want to make sure that people know that it's there. It has no one has benefited from Prop 209, not even the Asian community that claims that they were going to basically benefit from this merit-based system. And it is not, they have not. And most of the papers, the LA Times was one of the main ones that says, you know, we need to do this because we do not have a merit-based country. And as a result, we need to have something that will help to level the playing field so that people can then compete equally because of all the racism and sexism that exists in the society that creates an unequal existence, that we have to address that, and ignoring it, as we've done for 24 years, has not made things better.
Absolutely. And Lori, we were talking about that yesterday, about what we've seen on our campuses, that, you know, in the Cal State system, we're down to 3.4% Black. At UCLA, we're down to what? What are we down to in terms of Black students, and how have anti-affirmative action policies impacted what's happening on your campus?
Down to 3% of African Americans at UCLA. And, you know, I really love and appreciate everything that Dr. Weber just said. I also want to put a face with what the outcomes of affirmative action looks like. And as I was sharing with Melina, you know, we're always learning more about each other, but I am a first generation college grad, like a third of UCLA students today. I was born and raised in Chicago, attended Chicago Public Schools, and in 1995, I was given that kind of access and opportunity that Dr. Weber talks about through the Bridge Transition Program at the University of Illinois. So without that Bridge Transition Program that I entered in 1995, 25 years ago, I wouldn't be here today integrating the Department of Political Science along race and gender lines as the first tenure track woman of color and Black female in its history, or earning tenure and promotion in 2015 as the first tenured woman of color and the first Black female. I wouldn't be the first vice chair woman of color in its history in the political science department at UCLA, were it not for folks taking a chance on someone who's from the South Side of Chicago, who went to a school that I didn't know was under-resourced at the time, right? And I got into a couple of different colleges for those who actually came out to my high school to recruit. But the University of Illinois offered a summer bridge transition program, right? That offered the opportunity for me to have access to resources so that I could thrive, and so it can make up the gap that I experienced in a low-resourced high school. I thrived after that, achieving admissions to the University of Illinois, went on to a BA, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD, and on over here to teaching kids, hundreds of kids each year as a result of having access and opportunity. So I know firsthand what it's like 25 years later. And so now, Melina, you asked me about UCLA. This is now, I just started my 14th year at UCLA, and I look out in my large classes of 300 some odd students, and I see very few African American students. Although I teach courses on racial ethnic politics, I teach courses on state and local governance, and I enjoy teaching these diverse classes. Yes, they are very racially and ethnically diverse. But in terms of the very few African American students, very few Latino students, it is disheartening, right? Because I want to create the same opportunities that were presented to me so that they could thrive, they could reach their highest potential. And so what's at stake for a yes vote on 2016 is access to higher education, because believe you me, it changes socioeconomic status, not just for those kids who get access, right? But for the next generations, for our communities. I have a 5-year-old daughter now, and I know that her life experiences and trajectory is going to be different from mine, but it's because I had access to opportunity. And now I am here witnessing the need to increase diversity in our campuses, in our universities.
I'm still on mute. That's how you know I'm old. Dominique, I'd love to have you weigh in. Do your experiences mirror some of what Lori is sharing with us?
Well, you know, I'm so inspired by what Lori is saying and by what Dr. Weber is saying. First of all, I'm a mom, okay? And I know the impact of not having professors, teachers of color in the classroom on my kid and your kid and everybody's kid. And it's not just what I know as a mom, it's what studies show. Professors and teachers of color have higher expectations of children of color, and thus those students have better outcomes. It happens across the board. So what we're talking now is a cycle, a revolving door of opportunity or lack of opportunity. Also, to refer back to Dr. Weber's point, you know, they want to say, and the opposition against Proposition 16 is so tricky. They're trying to say that, you know, we want to make discrimination legal. That's a bunch of bull. You know, we don't have a meritocracy. If you look at the elite schools, those legacy scholarships for people whose parents and grandparents went there, that's affirmative action for rich white people. And no one seems to have a problem with back. But the reverse happens, and I call it reverse reparations, when you have things like the Trump administration now trying to go after Yale and shut down their programs to bring in people of color because they say they discriminate against white people, and Asians are just using Asians, you know, as a pawn, as a, you know, to keep us out. And so that's why, you know, affirmative action is so important. And what I've learned working to pass Proposition 16 is that we have a real challenge ahead of us. A lot of people don't know what Proposition 16 is. I am old enough to have remembered 209 and Ward Connerly, who is sort of like the spiritual grandfather of Stacey Dash and Paris Denard, you know, mix, and the betrayal of our community. And to understand that we have lost $1.5 billion a year as Black Californians in contracts and scholarship opportunities for the past 25 years. But a lot of people don't know what affirmative action is. They don't remember 209. And once they find out what it is, and that Proposition 16 and a yes on Proposition 16 is an opportunity to put anti-racism into policy, to put our protests into law, to bring equity and inclusion into a legislative format, to give us one more tool to create opportunity, to get access to generational wealth, to equity, to scholarships, to contracts, then they are for it. But most people don't know what it is. So, you know, Black Lives Matter LA family, conscious people, people that love us, people that hate us, people that, you know, don't care, please go out and tell someone else to vote yes on Proposition 16. Please explain what affirmative action is and how it's connected to anti-racism and equity and progress and our children's educational opportunities. Because for me as a mom, and for all of us who don't have an extra 1.5 billion a year sitting around somewhere, this is crucial. And what Dr. Weber has done is so amazing and so important. And we may not have another opportunity to bring this back to our state for a generation. So please vote yes on Prop 16 and help pass this measure.
And Baba Akili, so when Dominique says some people don't remember Prop 209, some people don't remember what affirmative action is, you've been fighting for racial equity and racial justice for a long time, right? And I guess we all have. I guess we're all earning titles in front of our names, right? But this has been really, really important to you. Passing Prop 16 has been really, really important to you. Many of you all know that Black Lives Matter Los Angeles doesn't take very many electoral politics positions, right? We're vote out Jackie Lacey. We're a yes on 16, a yes on 15, and a yes on 17, and pass Measure J. But you were one of the ones who raised up Prop 16 as something that's an imperative for Black people and Black Lives Matter in particular to be supportive of. Why? Why is Prop 16 so important? And can you just give us a little bit of that history about, you know, the fight and how we kind of, I don't even think we lost fair and square on the Prop 209 because they had that whole, you know, trickery in it, right? It was called the California Civil Rights Initiative. And I don't think most people understood what that was. I remember my cousin voting for the first time and going, hey, I voted yes on 209. You proud of me? And I was like, oh no, it was supposed to be a no. But she saw Civil Rights Initiative and it sounded like something that should have been a yes. Can you walk us through that history just a little bit, Baba Akili?
Yes, thank you. And I'm so glad to be on this panel with such powerful Black women, some of whom I've known, like Dr. Shirley Weber, for over 35 years. Let me take you back for a minute. 209 is classically anti-Blackness. I mean, it is classic anti-Blackness with a Black face in front of it. And I remember being a part of a statewide group. I was in San Diego at the time, and we talked about how to defeat it and the messages we had to have. And much like today, the opposition, and like today, the opposition is talking about don't divide us. whenever Black people want to achieve equity, that's somehow a division. That's somehow divisive. But when when white people just want to take us back, that's okay. But part of what I remember, the lessons I learned from the 209 was, one, we had to have a simple and direct message. And because propositions are generally phrased to confuse people, that 209 did just that, and you gave a good example. The other thing that I think we learned from that was that we needed to have creditable messengers. I remember, you remember Jesse Jackson came to San Diego, and he went on this tour and some other things, and that was very good. But what we missed was you and I talking, just people talking, and having creditable messengers about why this is good. And I'm hoping that that we can get to that before the end of the election cycle. And then finally, the third thing was being able to craft a message that is simple, direct, and understandable. And I think Proposition 16 is that, if we can get it to enough people in enough time. And that's, I mean, so those are some of the lessons that I remember from 209. The other thing that stood out was that because there was a Black person, Board Connolly, who made and advanced the argument, Black people would at least stop and give him consideration. When, and it was really Pete Wilson, the governor at the time, that literally bailed out 209 because it was failing. It couldn't raise any money. It had no creditable support. And Pete Wilson stepped in, helped raise money for it, helped get support for it, and helped make it more creditable than it was. And so, yes, Connolly was the face, but Pete Wilson was the operational manager, if you would. Pete Wilson and the Republican Party was behind it. Pete Wilson, the governor at the time, who was also unpopular, used it, as he did Prop 187 as a wedge issue to advance his particular political position. So, you know, and I see some of that beginning to happen here, but not as forcefully as it did 23 years ago. So the campaign was really a Republican effort at regression, if you will, taking Black people back. And so, and I want to thank and acknowledge Dr. Weber once again for doing this. I'd love to understand why now, Dr. Weber, did you choose, you and the Legislative Black Caucus decide to do this? And what is the conditions that you see now different than then? That's a question I have.
Well,
I want to remind you about Wilson.
Well, it was, you know, the not only the Black Caucus, but all the caucuses in the Assembly were involved with the Equal Protection, not Equal Protection, but Equal Justice Society. And for years, they've done surveys on what people's attitudes are with regards to this. And this is the one year that we saw some movement and some possibility of change. And so they approached us about doing it. But what really moved me most was I was at a hearing that I held at UC Berkeley with a number of students on campus climate, and it was a very diverse population of students. And I said, if there was one thing that you would want me to do, what would you want me to do to change the elements of your campus? And they all said, we want you to reverse Prop 209. And these were young people, and I was shocked. I said, you want me to? They said, yes. And I said, why? They said, because, and these are white students, Asian students, Latino, they says, because it will change the essence of our campus. We'll get faculty that look like us. We'll have students, diversity in students. We'll have staff who work here, who understand us. And they went on and on. They said, we have found that having diversity is important and that Prop 209 is an obstacle. These are the students at UC Berkeley. And we have an army of students across the state who are tweeting and who are working. We've actually hired about 60 or 70 college students to actually help with the campaign so that they're paid to do all the kinds of grunt work and things that we need done. But they were the ones who said, could you please do this for us? And I said, well, I'll think about it. So it was brought to us. And actually, then the driving force was the Black Caucus, because everybody else started getting scared, started getting nervous, starting having trepidations. Well, wonder if this will affect my reelection, and so they was almost saying, let's give up, let's do this, let's do that. And the Black Caucus was adamant, nope, we're going to do it. We all gave close to $100,000. We gave 10,000 each to basically make sure the campaign, the initial phase, was going right. We partnered with Equal Justice Society and the Chinese for Affirmative Action. And so we just started building this coalition. And then the virus came in, and I thought, oh my God, we won't get any attention. We can't even be heard. I thought we wouldn't get it out of the houses because it required 2/3 vote. And then, of course, a little old lady at church told me, said, don't be worried about it. She said, God's going to send you a ram in the bush. I said, really? She said, yeah, you remember the story of Abraham, and he thought he was going to kill his son. Instead, God sent something in place. And I thought, well, thank you. Okay, I hope this happens. And sure enough, George Floyd was killed, murdered on television. And that kind of changed people's perception a little bit, made it not easy, but easier for us to get to 2/3 in both houses, because people began to see there's inequality. Now, of course, people forget immediately. And so that's what we have to constantly remind them, that even though, all this stuff is happening and everybody's so excited and so upset over what they saw, this is one thing you can do to respond to it, rather than just feeling bad about it. This is something you can do. You see the inequalities, you see what's there. And so the perception is that there's going to be a huge turnout, that even people of color are going to turn out for this election because of Trump. That there'll be a number of that, and of course there will be a huge turnout. Now our issue now is making sure they understand it and they vote all the way down the ballot, and that we can raise. And we've raised maybe about 15 or 16 or 17 million dollars so far. So they're on TV and what have you. Messages slowly getting out. And we got about 250 or 300 organizations. So we met with them the other day to make sure all of them tell their membership that just not that you're endorsing, but all you AKs and Deltas and everybody else, get to your membership and let them know what's going on. So, we're in the final stages of pushing this to the end. And I've been on about 4 or 5 Zooms today, just about Prop 16 every day. And so it is important that we get folks out there, because this is the one thing that when people talk about, what can you do? I mean, all this inequality, particularly in California, this is something we can do directly. We can basically we can deal with this issue and begin to create equal opportunity and access by removing some of the barriers. But we thought this would be a good year because of the turnout that's there. And so we have to take advantage of that turnout, because people are going to go to the polls, people are going to vote. We need to make sure they vote down the ballot and get to 16 and vote yes, and 17 and vote yes. So that was what was behind the thinking at the time. We'll see what happens. The other thing is that we have really, even though the Chinese are still, the new immigrant Chinese is still very vocal, the standard Chinese, the regular Chinese, Japanese, the API group is very supportive of this initiative, because one of the things they've learned, they were used and so focused on universities, and the data concerning university admission shows that they have not benefited at all from Prop 209. They actually did better under affirmative action than they did in 209. So there's been no uptick in terms of them getting more into universities. But what has happened is they have lost a lot of business, and they've lost a lot of employment. And they're beginning to realize that they are discriminated against, because they're seen as the good minority who does not want anything other than a good job. But they're not in the C-suites, they're not in the executive places. They're realizing that despite all the folks they've sent to med school, they don't have a dean in any med school. They don't have a dean in any of these, in many of the law schools. And so as a result, they have been cut off from the executive positions, and they're not getting them. And so they're beginning to realize that it's more than just getting in school, that you've got to do some other things too. And there's a lot of discrimination against them. Plus, they've been discriminated against significantly in business because of Trump and what he calls as a Chinese virus, or the Korean virus, or whatever he wants to call it, the Japanese virus, whatever he calls it. But as a result of that, they have been discriminated against. And now they see what it is like to basically have someone look at you differently and treat you very differently. And so they have the Chinese for Affirmative Action is a huge group that's 51 years old, interestingly enough, as an organization, and very strong. And they are very active, involved in this initiative. So so there's a lot of pieces and parts that's moving. We hope it all comes together on November 3rd in terms of making this happen. But we thought this would be a good time, and a good moment. We've tried before, and they couldn't get any. We tried, I guess, about 5 years ago with Hernandez and ACA 5 at that time. They couldn't get any wind beneath it. The Speaker in the House, John Pettis, thought it would be very divisive, and he held it. He wouldn't let it out, and so and we couldn't get the movement, and those in the Assembly and the Senate were very afraid, and so we couldn't get a vote. We couldn't get anything out of it. And I can tell you, when I said to both in the leadership, I think I'm going to introduce this bill to eliminate affirmative action. They all got nervous. They're like, you don't want to do that.
To eliminate Prop 209.
209. Yeah, and they were like, they got nervous and looked at me like, don't do that. Whichever you do, don't do that. And and I just said, well, we'll see. I'll keep pushing this rock, see where we end up. Black Caucus was like, no, we ain't giving it up. We're just gonna keep on pushing. And so we had a lot of obstacles. They gave us the worst committee to go to at the beginning. We almost didn't get it out of committee. Almost the worst. I had to get a Republican to help me get it out and to shame the Democrats. And so we got it out of committee. And so it was interesting because, and then once we got out of the Assembly with 75%, the Republicans, the people in the Senate were not about to kill it because they didn't want to be shamed. But it was an interesting political battle to get it to this point where it's on the ballot. And most
Dr. Weber, I could talk all day to you about the process, because I know Lori and I are sitting here going, the process is so interesting, right? People don't understand the direct democracy pieces of it, that this is a referendum, right? That this is something that doesn't just go through a legislative process. It's not an initiative. It begins in the legislature and then goes to the ballot, because really what we're talking about is an amendment, right? And so we could talk all day about the process, but the bottom line is it now sits in the hands of the voters. That's right. And I think one of the things that you're lifting up when we talk about affirmative action, we're talking about everybody benefits from affirmative action. Everybody benefits. The only people who think they don't benefit is white men, right? So people of color benefit, women benefit, even white women benefit. In fact, when we look at the numbers, white women have been the predominant beneficiaries of affirmative action. So really it should be, even if you're just voting in your own narrow self-interest, this should be a done deal. Prop 16 should pass. What does the polling look like on this?
Well, the polling looks, I think I've seen 2 or 3. I was at the Union Tribune, and the polling looked at, we're like about 40%, 40%, just initially telling you, yes, I'm gonna vote for it. And then when you, and then you have a huge group of people who are undecided. But then when you explain to them what it is, then you jump maybe 20 points as a result of people knowing what it is. So that says that we have to let people know what it is, because there are those who know and they vote, but the rest of the people are unclear about it. And then some Black folks think because it says you can consider race and gender, that, they can discriminate against us. And so as a result, they think this is going to be some policy that's going to put them back in slavery. And we're saying you can't discriminate against anybody, period, because of the Constitution that doesn't allow discrimination. But a lot of folks think that that's when it says you can consider race and gender, that means they would be discriminated against. So it's a battle of trying to explain to them exactly what it is. But once you do, they're with it. And once they see who the validators are, that, this is Kamala Harris, this is the governor, this is, the mayor of LA, or this is, Ridley Thomas, or this is whomever, then people say, okay, then it must be good. So folks have got the connection between the ballot and the validators and the fact that it's beneficial to them. Once you explain it, they're there. They're there.
So Baba Keeley, I'm going to you as master organizer. How do we do that? It sounds like there's a lot of organizing work that has to be done before November 3rd around Prop 16. What do we all need to do? What are our marching orders?
Well, some simple things. hashtag yes on 16.
Mhm.
We can everybody can do that. Because you can put that on your email. I mean, you can do that. That's a simple thing. And you know, the other thing I do think, and Dr. Weber, I want to follow up with you. We have to expand the credible voices that are saying yes is good. You know, and so having professors like yourselves and others coming out and saying yes, this is good. And we've got about 20 days, you know,
Yeah.
that can do that. And so the first thing for me would be the credible voices. How many people can we, in our circles, can we get to communicate yes on 16? It's a good thing. It's, you know, that kind of thing. So, because that's one of the lessons we learned from 209. I think the second thing is how do we use social media in ways that help amplify the message. I like the fact that Dr. Weber, you talked about, you know, you have college students who are engaged in that. But how can we purposely, deliberately just focus on tweeting out every day, yes on 16? That's something that we all can do. And if we do it within our own networks, we become the creditable voice and why we're supporting it. But I want to focus on the creditable voices because that's who people will look to. You know, and I'm hoping maybe next Wednesday, when we get together, we can remind people of the value of Proposition 16. You know, and I'm hoping that at some point, maybe on the front page, Dr. Weber will be on to talk about, you know, the proposition and its meaning and value. Those kinds of things. And I'm hoping that the yes on 16 actually bought some time on KCFJ also. So those are some of the things, but I want to start with the creditable voices.
And Dominique, this is a priority proposition for you because again, you were one of the ones who brought this up. It's something that we really need to lift up and push through while we have a moment. Why is it such a priority for you, and how do we make sure that it becomes a priority for other folks as well?
Well, I mean, this is a campaign that I'm working on. So it's really important to me for lots of reasons. I know a lot of people say, you know, vote, don't march, or protest and march. And I love the idea. I feel like one of the reasons this can succeed right now is because of Black Lives Matter and the anti-racist movement and the marching and the consciousness raising that's been going on in 2020. And you know, and before that too, but this, you know, incredible window that we have right now. And so I think it's really important. I also think, look at the money, $1.5 billion a year in opportunities and scholarships, Black wealth. We talk about generational wealth and equity. This is concrete and it's really straight ahead. Vote yes on 16. It's a simple thing. Baba Akili is right on point. We need credible people. We need our neighbors and friends, not just celebrities. Celebrities are good too. You know, Ava DuVernay and you know, Alfred Woodard and Issa Rae have all signed on recently to this with yeses. Your friend Kendrick Sampson and lots of other people. But the thing is, we need to tweet, just like Akili said. We need to talk to each other. We have so much material, information, you know, I'll write tweets for you. We'll send you material. Look, if you need help, you know, email me, you know, deprimerradio@gmail.com. Reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook. I'll send you, you know, all kinds of stuff. We need to get the word out. People don't understand this. And once they figure it out, it's a yes. And I think Akili is absolutely right. People need to talk to people. That's what we have to do. That's what we have the power to do. This initiative is important. It is also not as well funded as we wish it was, right? So we all have to be that voice. I'm happy to have anybody on front page anytime. We've been talking about it all the time. Love Dr. Weber. So grateful for her reparations legislation, for her police bill. And I keep telling people, this is the sequel, you know, brought to you by Dr. Weber to the reparations piece. It's concrete. It's right now, it's tangible, and it is doable, but it's not going to happen if we don't all step up, right? Dr. Abdullah, you're right. There's a lot of really important, great things on this ballot, you know, 15, 17, just no on 20 for me is really important. There's a lot of great things and important things to vote on. A new DA would be amazing, a new president. But I think this is a 25-year-old fight that we need to win right now while we have the opportunity. And like you always say, when we fight, we win. I'm showing up, I'm fighting. I hope that you're going to join me in this fight for Yes on 16.
You're muted.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. And I want to give Dr. Frazier just a few minutes. We're wrapping up. But Dr. Frazier, if you could just give us some words of wisdom as we try to mobilize folks to go to the polls and vote all the way down the ballot. Make sure we don't stop before the propositions. The propositions are important. Can you just give us a little bit of wisdom about how important propositions are to the lives of people on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you so much, everyone. This was such a, my heart is so full about this conversation, and I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Weber, and so grateful to all of the work that you've done. I know that this is not new for the Black community and for communities who are progressive and who want change. I know for sure that despite the pandemic, right, that folks of color, Black women in particular, have come out. We show up and we show out. And I know for sure that despite the pandemic, folks will continue to organize. I agree wholeheartedly with Baba about the extent to which we need to have folks come on board, the bandwagon effect, if you will. Folks figuring out, hey, so-and-so is for this. But at the same time, we also need to get the word out to our communities. Tweeting, the use of social media is important, but also giving. And I'm never afraid to ask for money, right? So again, you need an opportunity to sort of, whether it's small donations from our neighbors or larger donations from those who can afford to do so. I think that that is really important. In terms of grassroots organizing and get out the vote, this is something that we've long done. And I do know that because of the pandemic, it is more difficult, and a lot of our elders and young folks alike are concerned about safety, right? And whether or not canvassing, poll working, and coming out to vote, that they will be safe. Will there be PPE at the polls for poll workers? Will there be safety and precaution measures if there's some static at the polls, for example? So, but despite all of those things and those concerns, we know that we show out. We have show up and show out. We know that we've been difficult times before. But, and oftentimes our communities have suffered voter suppression and violence. But we know that despite all of our history, again, I gotta say one more quick thing, Melina, this is the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And we know that we are also uplifting those who came before us. We know that Fannie Lou Hamer and so many others. It is imperative that we get out there and that we cast our ballot, or we're doing what we need to do to teach folks how to mail in their ballot correctly and safely, right? So that it counts. The information flows are going to be pivotal over the next couple of weeks, but also fearlessly raising money in order to get this work done. So I know that we can do it. Our elders have done it and showed us how to do it, and we will continue the fight.
Yes, thank you so much. That's time for us, and we just want to thank Dr. Lori Frazier, Acting Director of the UCLA Bunch Center. We want to thank Dominique DePrima of KJLH Front Page, and really leader in this community. We want to thank Baba Akili from Black Lives Matter Los Angeles core team and a veteran organizer. And of course, we want to thank Dr. Shirley Weber, author of this proposition, leader in the California State Assembly, leader in the Legislative Black Caucus, and author, leader, advocate, and the one who's behind so much good legislation coming out of Sacramento. Thank you, Dr. Weber, for being on the front lines of this. Thank you for writing this. We want to encourage everybody who is watching to talk to at least 5 other people and tell them yes on Proposition 16. Thank you so much, Pro Bono ASL, for being with us, for signing with us. Thank you, Megan and Rajay, for doing the tech work. And we want to remind everybody that organizing doesn't stop. Please join us on Sunday at 7 p.m. for our Black Lives Matter general meeting, Sunday at 7 p.m. at Normandy Church of Christ, Sunday at 7 p.m. If you want to know how to share information on Prop 16, we have a new tool. Now this conversation is on Facebook. You can share it out with all of your friends, post it on your own timeline, tag people and tell them to watch. If they're confused, this will hopefully shed some light. Please get out and do the work. The only thing that defeats the money that rich white folks have is the people on the ground. And we are the people on the ground, and we will win. As long as we fight, we'll win. Thank you so much. Please join us again next Thursday on This Is Not a Drill. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.